What is going on, guys? And today I'm doing an NBA draft comparison video for the 2016 NBA draft. I only did one previous draft video, and it was predicting who the 14 lottery teams will select, or the 14 lottery picks. And I feel like I should go a little bit more in depth, as the draft is one of my favorite parts of the NBA season, if not the NBA in general. So let's go into it, and I'm going to say my comparisons for each player and how I think they'll fit in the NBA and whatnot about them. So first things first is Ben Simmons. Now, in terms of these comparisons, a little forewarning, some of them might not seem too accurate, or people might not agree with me. However, these are based on how I feel that their skill set will translate, how they play like, who they'll play like, how successful they'll be. There's a lot of factors, and some may not be the best, but I'll try to explain myself through it. So first things first is Ben Simmons. Now, previously I said he'd be like a Lamar Odom, most likely, and then if not, he might be like a rookie LeBron James, but can get up to LeBron's skill set. Now, thinking about him a little bit more, I think the absolute floor for Ben Simmons, and maybe his rookie campaign and maybe sophomore campaign, he can be a lot like Tyreke Evans. Now, Tyreke Evans recently hasn't been doing too much in the NBA, but as a rookie, he was one of only a few guys ever to average 25-5, and he was really one of the best rookies there's been, besides Blake Griffin and maybe Karl-Anthony Towns that we've seen him since probably LeBron's. Of course, there's other guys around there. Chris Paul had a great rookie season, for instance, but he was still a very good player. And I feel like Ben Simmons, even though he's about 5 inches taller, he has a very similar skill set of ball dominant forward. And of course, Tyreke was more of a shooting guard, but right now he plays more small forward. But they're both very ball dominant guys. They really can't shoot well, but he's a very good finisher on the rim. Both of them are. So I feel like Tyreke Evans is the low side for Ben Simmons. Now, in terms of his high side and who I think he can be, is LeBron James type. Of course, he might not be as dominant as LeBron, but I think he has the skill set, size, and everything, and of course the potential to do that. He does need to develop a jumper, and while LeBron is not the most accurate shooter or the best shooter there is, he is still a pretty respectable shooter, and when he's hot, he's very hot, especially last night in game 5 of the finals, where he shot 4 for 8 from deep and dropped over 40 points. LeBron was the best shooter back when he was in Miami, but regardless, he is still a pretty talented player. So, moving on after LeBron, sorry about all the noise in the background, got a little bit of a cramp. We're going on to Brandon Ingram. Now, Brandon Ingram is a very talented player, and kind of tough to pick out who he'll be like. Now, a lot of people think he's going to be the next Kevin Durant, but I don't know if he'll be that great, as Kevin Durant, besides the rookie season, was an absolute animal in the NBA. He still had a pretty solid rookie season. You can put him up there with guys, as I mentioned earlier, like with Tyreke, guys who had a great rookie season. Even in college, he was absolutely outstanding. And even though Brandon Ingram was pretty solid, he was not at Kevin Durant's level, where Kevin Durant, as a freshman in college, I believe he averaged, I don't remember points-wise, but it was something like 27 and 11, where he led the league both in scoring and rebounding, I believe. He's just been super dominant since he came into the league. So, I don't think he'll be that good, but he can be a Kevin Durant light, where he can do most of the stuff he does. Similar body size and skill set, but not as great or as efficient. Now, a guy who I think will be like more likely is a Giannis type. While Giannis was never a great three-point shooter, he had a decent rookie season in terms of shooting threes. I think he can be pretty much like him. A guy with pretty good ball handling, very lanky, a lot of defensive potential, and of course just going to be a great player to start your franchise around, or build your franchise with. Now, Giannis, of course, now is taken off as pretty much the biggest point guard, of all time. Standing at 6'11", he can play point guard, even though I don't really agree. He's just a point forward. He can be, Brandon Ingram can technically be that. He's very similar in size, as when Giannis came to NBA, he was only 6'9", and he weighed about the same, about 190, 195-ish. So I think that's a more apt comparison. But still, regardless, I feel like that Brandon Ingram can be very talented and be a Giannis type. Now moving on to the next guy, Buddy Hield. Now, if you're wondering why I put Buddy Hield third, this isn't a mock draft. This is based on the top big board from NBADraft.net. I kind of skipped a little bit towards the end. You'll see it where they had guys such as Furkan Korkmaz, I believe was like the 12th prospect, and I kind of just moved him out of the way. I don't really remember. Point being, this is Buddy Hield. Now, watching Buddy Hield, he's a very, very skilled scorer, and you can tell in the pros he can be a very solid shooting guard all around. Now, I have three guys up there: Lillard, McCollum, and of course Eric Gordon. One is Lillard, where if he materializes all his potential and can do everything he can, I feel like he can be a Damian Lillard type. He has a very fast release, great scorer for Oklahoma, which is a pretty big college and a pretty strong conference. And that's one thing that you kind of need to judge off of, even though both Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum kind of proved wrong, is that if you're in a big conference, you're playing big important teams, and you put up good numbers, most likely you'll be a successful NBA player. But if you're like in a smaller college playing crap teams and you put up good numbers, then you can start to question it. While, I mean, Lillard and McCollum, they played both good and bad teams, but they were still pretty solid in college. But I mean, if you're in a really, really good conference and you're putting up terrible numbers all 4 years, then you might not be that good in reality. Anyways, let's talk about the guys. So I think realistically he can be a CJ McCollum type. If he can really do everything that he does in college and add to his skill set, he can be like Damian Lillard, where Lillard is also a pretty solid playmaker, as well as a scoring shooter. And then if he really can't translate that well, he is still a deadly three-point shooter, which Eric Gordon is, even though he has really regressed. I feel like Eric Gordon's a very good comparison, at least for his rookie season, what he'll be like. I don't know if he's going to be able to come out and be super efficient handling the ball and whatnot. But, I mean, Eric Gordon's still a pretty talented guy who can take it to the rim and finish around the big guys, and of course shoot the three as well. So those are my three comparisons. Realistically, I feel like he can be CJ McCollum, put up about like maybe 22, 23 points a game, throwing like 2 or 3 assists or so, about that many rebounds, and just be a secondary ball handler and scorer on a pretty solid team. Now, of course, as I mentioned earlier, he could be Damian Lillard. I believe he only averaged 2 assists per game, but that says maybe more about his team than him. In college especially, where you see some really talented guys who are pretty solid playmakers in the pros not have a lot of assists, mainly because their teammates might not be good enough. So anyways, let's keep on going. Next up is Jamal Murray from Kentucky. Now this is one guy who's kind of hard to pinpoint where he'll be in the pros and how he'll develop, but the two guys who I feel like are best comparisons for him are Klay Thompson and JJ Redick. Of course, one is much better than the other, where Klay Thompson is a very solid defender, if not one of the better defenders in the league, and he is a better shooter than JJ Redick, but I mean, JJ is still so incredible, you can't say he's a bad shooter. The thing with Jamal Murray is he's a very good scorer, where I believe he averaged over 20 a game as a freshman at Kentucky, which you almost never see. Their big name prospects never average that many, unless they become super successful in the league. I mean, even Karl-Anthony Towns, I don't remember how much he averaged, probably averaged I think 12 at Kentucky, and like Devin Booker averaged 10. So that just proved that if you can put up 20 points as a freshman at Kentucky, that you're going to be a pretty solid player. At least I hope he will be, as he seems like a pretty good guy. Of course, Kentucky wasn't as dominant as they have been in the years past, but I still feel like these are two pretty good comparisons, as both are deadly three-point shooters, which he is. But the main difference between the two, especially besides defense, is the ability to score off the dribble. Now, JJ Redick can hit some mid-range pull-up shots and whatnot, but Klay Thompson is much more elite at the skill, as well as finishing around the basket. Jamal Murray did show some signs of being a good finisher, a good finisher at Kentucky. So I feel like if he continues that into the league, he can definitely be Klay Thompson from like his first couple seasons, where he wasn't a great defender yet, but he was still a pretty elite shooter. Now, if he works on his defense, he can become a Klay Thompson type. I forgot what season it was, but probably 2 or 3 years ago, Klay Thompson mentioned he worked an hour and a half, 2 hours every day in the offseason work on his defense, and became a pretty solid defender in the league. And the thing is, Klay Thompson, I don't think he was really known as like a crazy elite hard worker. And then again, I don't know too much about these people in their personal lives. But I mean, if this guy wasn't known for his hard work, well, guys such as like Damian Lillard and Draymond Green and those type of guys are known for like their crazy work ethic, and like Wiggins and Towns, those guys. Yeah, there's a lot of guys. I mean, Jamal Murray can be a pretty solid pro. So realistically, I think he'll end up like a little bit better JJ Redick, and maybe in this prime years he can pull out like a Klay Thompson season. Now moving on to a guy I don't know too much about, Dragon Bender. I didn't know too much about because these comparisons aren't the best, and I like to stay away from the comparisons that everyone throws out where people just say, Ingram is KD, LeBron with Simmons, and then of course, Dirk with Dragon Bender, Porzingis, just because of the fact that either A, they are very lazy comparisons, or B, that they kind of look like them. That's another thing about NBADraft.net that I do like a lot. They are pretty good for comparisons and whatnot, but they are not that good in terms of being, I don't know, racist, but they compared every white prospect to a white NBA player, so I try to step away from that. But Dragon Bender, with all of his mysteriousness, or the fact that I don't know too much of him, a lot of people don't know too much about him, I compared him to two European guys, which I kind of hated doing, but these are the two best I can think of, Nikola Mirotic and Jan Vesely. Now some people might be thinking, Jan Vesely, why? Now let me tell you, even though Jan Vesely doesn't really plague him at all, he was kind of like this mystery prospect, a guy who can be really skilled in the NBA and do really well, and he just flamed out in 3 years. I believe he was the 6th pick by the Wizards in 2011, 12, 13, sometime around that range, and he just really couldn't do much in the NBA. He played for them and I believe the Nuggets before just completely leaving the league. Now watching some Dragon Bender highlights, it's kind of tough to pinpoint him, and I'm not too confident in his future in terms of what he'll do. It'll take a while for him to develop, but I think Nikola Mirotic is a pretty solid comparison. Mirotic does have, I believe, like 6 years on him, so you can easily develop into him, but they have a similar jump shot and they have a similar game hanging around the perimeter, but Bender seems a lot more assertive, which is good for his potential in future. But those are my comparisons for Dragon Bender. Moving on to Jalen Brown. Now Jalen Brown is a guy who's hard to pinpoint, as well as he's a really good finisher around the basket, really athletic, good and everything, but he can't shoot that well. He does have a lot of potential, so I compared him to, at the best, I feel like he can be a Corey Maggette type, who I like comparing players to. I believe I told people, or posted online, that I thought that TJ Warren could be a Corey Maggette-ish player. I feel like that's not the greatest, but still a solid comparison. Or you can be a Gerald Green, but much stronger Gerald Green. Now, Gerald Green is a complete heat check player where you can come into a game and drop 20 very easily, dunk on people, shoot threes. And I feel like Jalen Brown, if he really doesn't do too much more than just develop a jumper, he can do that pretty easily. But I feel like Corey Maggette, he can become a much more well-rounded scorer, finished around the basket, getting little shots around the rim, and stuff like that will actually help him develop a much better career. I've mainly compared him to Corey Maggette due to his strength and finishing ability. Corey Maggette, he took a while to become a good 3-point shooter, so I think that Jalen Brown has the potential to become a Corey Maggette type. Now moving on to a guy who's kind of hard to pinpoint as well, and Kris Dunn. Now some people aren't very high on him. Comparisons to Jordan Clarkson are uncommon to see online, even though I like Jordan Clarkson. I think that's kind of selling him a little bit short, especially defensively. But other people are really high on him, and I'm middle of the road with him. He put up really good numbers, and he proved he can be a pretty dominant leader on a team. Now I think worst case scenario, he could be Marcus Smart, Marcus Smart, or like maybe what people think Marcus Smart can be soon. He's a much better shooter, I believe, than Marcus Smart in terms of 3-point range. But I can see him being a Marcus Smart type, being a ball dominant guard who can play like astounding defense. So that's why I compare him to Marcus Smart. Now, the more, I don't know, realistic or hopeful comparison for him is John Wall. He might not be as fast as John Wall, but he's still pretty athletic. He's a better shooter than John Wall, pretty much John Wall ever was. but he has some similar skill set of being a really good playmaker, finisher around the rim, athletic, and can be a pretty solid defender where he put up a lot of steals numbers. So I think because of that, Chriss Dunn can most likely be a John Wall or John Wall light, and I think Marcus Smart is a solid comparison for maybe his floor. Now moving on to a guy who I like a lot, Domantas Sabonis, mainly because of the fact that he is the son of a former NBA star, mainly a star in Europe, Arvydas Sabonis. Now, some people are going full lazy on him, or I believe NBA Draft.net just compared him to Marc Gasol. Even though that's not like a horrible comparison, it's the fact that Domantas isn't a great defender, and they just threw out one of the better defenders in the past decade, or post defenders in the past decade, just because they're both big white guys who can do like those white boy shots around the rim. However, there's a guy who does that, and I feel is more apt to compare him to, and that is Zach Randolph. Of course, there's a big difference between the two, as you can see on the screen right now. One wears a headband and one doesn't, but in reality, they're very similar players. I don't think Domantas can be an elite defender, shot blocker type, but he can be a Zach Randolph defender. Just get his weight underneath there. I believe he weighs 240 right now, which is really solid to come into the league as, especially as a big guy. And just be a decent low post defender, while offensively just get those little easy shots around the rim. And then he's a pretty solid rebounder as well, which is something that Zach Randolph is as well. And he's a pretty decent shooter as well, at least in the mid-range, and maybe can stretch it to the 3-point range in a couple years. So I feel like Zach Randolph is a pretty good comparison, at least in my opinion. Then again, it is my comparison, so I might be a little biased, but I feel like with all his skills and what he can be in the league, I feel like he can be a Zach Randolph type pretty quickly, and hopeful for that as well. Now moving on to a guy who's been moving up the draft boards crazy quick, and that is Marquese Chriss out of Washington. Now, Chriss wasn't a super highly recruited athlete. I believe he was mid-50s, and he didn't show off too much besides his athleticism and potential up at Washington. However, he can be a really talented player with a lot of ways he can go. I think if he really doesn't materialize in the NBA, he can be a Tyrese Thomas-like player. And you get him in the top 10, Tyrese Thomas isn't the worst, especially if this guy's able to stay in the league for a while, as Tyrese was a really athletic finisher, could block some shots, rebound, and just run. So I think all those are pretty good. And a guy who I think he can be more likely if he really works on his game is Rudy Gay. He has a lot of the same shots that you see from Rudy Gay, a lot of those little fadeaways in the mid-range. He doesn't shoot as many threes as Rudy Gay, but he can develop that. He's pretty athletic. I don't know as athletic as Rudy, but he does a lot of the same stuff that Rudy Gay does, and hopeful that he can become a Rudy Gay type, as Rudy Gay was pretty solid scorer and still is for the past 6-7 years. So I think that's a pretty good comparison for Marquese Chriss. Really athletic forward, because you don't know, maybe he'll play small forward. He's about 6'9", 6'10", and so he's between that small forward, power forward type. Now, moving on to a guy who I really don't know too much about, but Deonte Murray out of Washington as well. Now, this guy is a really skinny guard, kind of tall. I believe he's 6'5", 6'6". Really good ball handler and finisher, so I think a good comparison for him is Lance Stevenson. Now, Lance was never an elite three-point shooter. He had a couple of decent years, and Deonte Murray isn't really a good three-point shooter as well. But the thing about him is that he's a really good ball handler and a good finisher, both things that Lance Stevenson was elite in, especially in Indiana. Now, he doesn't have a jump shot, but if he does develop a jump shot, I feel like he can be like Jamal Crawford. He has those same, side-to-side moves, herky-jerky moves that some people like to call it, that Jamal Crawford has, where he can just get around players and get to the rim. I think this is a pretty good comparison for him, especially if he can develop a jump shot. If not, I believe he can still be a Jamal Crawford-like, where he can, instead of shooting from 3 really well, he can shoot from mid-range at a decent percentage. So that's Deonte Murray and his comparisons. Now moving on to a guy who was kind of hard to pinpoint, and this is when I started drifting away from the big board, where Brice Johnson was the guy I'm comparing right now. I believe Brice Johnson in some places like Draft Express has him as a second rounder, which is crazy, and those teams will be kicking themselves if he falls the second round. But on NBADraft.net, they're a little bit higher, as he's going to be a late lottery, mid-first rounder, and I feel like that's a good spot for him. He's a little bit older, as he is a senior, but he's a pretty young senior. He's only 21, I believe, which is pretty young for most seniors, as you see some freshmen now are 20 years old, like Malachi Richardson up at Syracuse, so he does have a lot of room to grow. But for him, I feel like a good comparison for him is an athletic Anderson Varejao. Now, a lot of people aren't too sure what he can be in the league, as he's a pretty good rebounder and finisher around the rim. He isn't an elite shot blocker, but he can block a few shots a game, which may make you think of John Henson, who went to North Carolina as well, about the same size. I believe Henson's 6'11", 220, while Brice Johnson's about 6'10", 210, so they're pretty similar in size. However, I feel like Anderson Varejao is a better comparison, as Varejao has never been a really good shot blocker, but always a really good defender and a guy you always want on your team, who can rebound and finish and do putbacks and all the small things you really need, and that's what Brice Johnson really brings to you. But he's much more athletic, where he can catch lobs, putback dunks, and all this stuff. So Brice Johnson's a guy who I'm very hopeful in the league. If he puts on 25, 30 pounds or so muscle, he can be a super coveted big man, as he has almost elite size at that weight, and can do a lot of things for a team that really needs him. So that's my comparison for him. Alright, moving on to a guy from Utah, where I went full lazy in comparison, but I feel like it's still a good comparison, and Jakob Poeltl. I don't know if I'm saying that right. The big guy, I believe he was a sophomore, and I compared him to Andrew Bogut. Andrew Bogut, of course, as well, went to Utah, is a big white guy who can finish around the rim, or at least he could, back when he was on the Milwaukee Bucks, and is a pretty good rebounder and defender. So that's mainly the reason why I compared the two. And the thing is, everyone compares the two, and I feel like that's the best you're going to get. I really don't know about a guy who can finish around the rim, block shots, and rebound. With his kind of skill set, I feel like Andrew Bogut's the best comparison. He's not as good as Andrew Bogut in college, where they both went to Utah, but he's still pretty solid and a similar kind of skill set. Now moving on to another white guy that I kind of went a little bit lazy on choosing a white guy, but I feel like it's a pretty solid comparison. For Henry Ellenson from Marquette, I compared him to Ryan Anderson, who I believe he played for California in college, but he's been bounced around the league recently. Now, Ryan Anderson has been injured a lot recently, but when he's healthy, he's one of the better power forwards in the game, where he's a pretty good rebounder, really good three-point shooter, and just really good offensive rebounding nevertheless. The first NBA game I actually went to, a little fast fact about me, was an Orlando Magic versus a Philadelphia 76ers game. And I don't even live in Philly or Orlando. I'm not a fan of either team, but I was just on vacation and I watched this game, and Ryan Anderson had an absolutely insane game. I really didn't go to any games that I was younger. I don't remember how old I was when I went to this, but this was a few years ago, and I feel like Henry Ellenson can be this guy. Now, NBADraft.net, I have to shout him out, or not even shout him out, but call him out on this one. They did a horrible comparison, comparing him to Scalabrine or Brian Cardinal, because that's literally just picking a guy who's white, who can shoot threes at an alright level, and that's just pretty much a disgrace to him. I believe he averaged something like 17, 11, and 2 blocks a game, and while Ryan Anderson was not a rim protector and is not a rim protector at all in the pros, he's still a very solid three-point shooter and a decent rebounder, so I think that's a pretty good comparison for him. This is one I want to know about, who you think he can be like, because I'm not too sure really what his ceiling, his floor, his realistic comparison is, but I feel a lot that Ryan Anderson is a solid comparison for him. Now moving on to a guy who some places slipped as well for some reason, Denzel Valentine. I believe he's predicted to go to the mid-20s. He is literally the perfect Atlanta Hawks prospect, and my comparison for him is George Hill. Now this is more the raw how they play, I guess, or what they're going to do in the league, because I don't think they're the most realistic comparisons. But the way I compared them was both are pretty good three-point shooters. Denzel has a chance to be a pretty solid defender in the pros, and George Hill is not the greatest defender, but he's a pretty solid one you want on your team. And even though he's not really a flashy all-star level point guard, you can't really complain about having him on your team, and that's exactly what Denzel Valentine will do for you in the pros. Be a pretty solid ball handler, playmaker, do-it-all type of guy. And even though he's a little bit bigger than George Hill, I feel like that's the best comparison for him, especially with a three-point shot. So let me know about him as well, as maybe at his best he can be like a Paul Millsap type, where if he's a really good defender in the pros he can just do absolutely everything like what Paul Millsap does, but I feel more realistically he'll be like George Hill-esque. Now moving on to the last guy, Deonte Davis from Michigan State. Now this guy's pretty tough to predict as well. I believe that Tom Thomas is the prediction, which isn't the worst, but you know, I like to keep somewhat relevant players or guys who played recently comparisons. So I compared him to Festus Ezeli. Now I watched a couple highlight videos from him. I really didn't watch him in college too much, and he just seems like a really good young athletic big man who can do whatever in the league. There's a lot of them out right now. You can see the high side of like Hassan Whiteside and DeAndre Jordan, but I feel like a guy who has a lot of potential is Festus Ezeli, and that's a lot what I saw in Deonte Davis when I watched his videos of him just playing basketball. He can finish around the rim pretty well, looks like a solid rebounder, and is a really good rim protector. Surprisingly, I believe he averaged almost 2 blocks a game in limited minutes. So I think he has a lot of potential to be a really good shot blocker and rim protector in the league. So I'm compared him to Festus Ezeli, who is pretty good in all those aspects as well. Of course, I'm not the most sure about how he'll actually be in the league, but that's my personal opinion. Of course, let me know about him, because I'm not a huge Michigan State fan. So if anyone really knows what he'll be like, just let me know. Anyways, guys, that's my draft comparisons video. If you watch this far or like my comparisons or whatnot, give me a thumbs up down below. Comment what you think about them, or did I go completely wrong or go completely right for a player. Subscribe for more 2K, NBA, and draft videos, as I'll be doing a lot upcoming to the draft, which I believe is a week from tomorrow. Share with your friends, share anywhere, Reddit, wherever, Facebook, goddamn Facebook, I didn't think that was possible. Why did I say that? But anyways, guys, I'd like to thank you guys for watching, and of course, have a good day.